Maybe. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 11 of the Dcrtime Assembly. And here we are today on the show. We have a couple special guests. Today, we're joined by our co-host, Austin Williams. Say hi.
How's it going?
We also have a special community member who's been a part of the Dcrtime community for a long time. Jay-Z is also with us at Defcon. Say hey, Jay-Z. He's joining us from Canada. And our main guest on the show today is Marco Peereboom from the Dcrtime project. He is CTO of Company0, which is the company that formerly builds Dcrtime. He is also a former OpenBSD developer and also a longtime open source and free and open source software developer. Been in the space for a long time, and we're really happy to have him on the show finally. I've been bugging him for weeks to come on the show, and he's finally here today. So yeah, everybody say hi. Hi, everybody.
Hi,
Thanks
everybody.
to our 13 viewers out there. Hopefully more people come in. Please be sure to share, comment, and
Like it.
tweet, like it, do all that crap that you need to do so other people know that the show's going on. So before we get started today, I want to talk about some of the community updates that we have going on. Mainly, we have some really cool stuff going on within the Dcrtime community. One thing is for this show, we actually used Reddit as our primary intake for questions. So, and I think we're going to start doing this going forward. We're really trying to build our Reddit community up. So going forward for the next few episodes, at least, I think we're going to start taking all questions on Reddit. So if you're not a member of our subreddit community, then please feel free to join and subscribe and participate in that. The other thing is we had a couple really big blog post updates that Jake sent out in the past few weeks. One is a call for contractors. So he's kind of formalized the process, the informal process of being hired as a contractor for the project. So it's a really great blog post. We'll post in the show notes after the episode and check it out. The other thing is he last week gave a roadmap update. So he went through the progress rise and everything. So it's got some really great information. So please feel free to check it out, guys. And lastly, the community is building a character, or has built a character by the name of Stakey. If you guys haven't seen him yet, he's kind of become the mascot for Dcrtime. They have a lot of really great ideas on how we can use Stakey. So we might need to end up doing some animated films that are part of like that will show like explaining certain random like parodies of situations going on in space. Could be a really fun way to share more about the Dcrtime community and what we're all about, and also educate people on a lot of these difficult topics, and also I think poke fun at some of the funny parts of what's going on in our space. So all right, so without yeah, and if you guys are interested, please join our Slack channel. We have some really great community, like some really great channels that are building, like marketing and ideas channel, which is really great for anybody who wants to get involved and just pitch out ideas, throw out random ideas. The community is really coming together. It's really cool to see everybody stepping up. So anyways, without further ado, welcome to the show, Marco. How's it going?
Doing well. How are you all doing?
We're doing great.
My post-Defcon coughing fit that I ended up with. I guess I shook one too many hands.
Oh, man. Yeah, there's like 25,000 people at that conference. It was crazy. So, well, before we get started on DEF CON, that's going to be our next question. But, I guess just to get started, welcome to the show again. And I guess what we typically start off with most shows is explaining how you got involved in crypto and, like your involvement in this space. Like, where did it all become? Where did you discover crypto, and what made you decide to get involved?
Oh man, that is going back some years. So I got interested in crypto very early on. Never acted on it because I was too busy writing operating systems and some other things. But I wanted to say probably around 99, 2000 is when I really got into the space and got interested. So when I worked at Dell for a very long time, and I was one of the people that worked on some of the products that dealt with some of that stuff. So although my background there was mostly in storage, people were becoming pretty cognizant that crypto at rest was a thing, right? So you needed to encrypt files before you drop them down. So there was always that in the background. So traditionally a hardware engineer who turned operating system engineer who turned crypto engineer. That's sort of the progression there.
That's awesome.
And how did you get involved, I guess, in cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin and so forth?
So I was very interested in when it just came out, like I was going to say 2009. And then I got busy writing ciphertypes. And then it was 2013, and everybody was rich minus me. So I had kept it, in the I kept my eyes on it, but I really did not act on anything. I wasn't a true believer back then, if you will. So that has changed, and I'm glad that I'm playing in the space now.
Nice.
Awesome. Yeah. So, all right, brings us to the next question. So, for all that don't know, myself, Jay-Z, and Marco, we all attended the Defcon conference, and since we really haven't introduced Jay-Z yet, I guess I'll let him start off by giving us his thoughts on what he thought of Defcon and any takeaways that you might have for people out there.
Sure thing. Well, Defcon was definitely interesting, and I was expecting a hacker conference, and it was a hacker conference, but there was also a hacker petting zoo kind of aspect to it, where there was a lot of spectators and groupies, it seemed, which was interesting. And I know from the conversations we had, saying you're an early adopter in crypto at this point is not even the tip of the iceberg, because people's knowledge, even of just Bitcoin, seems to be very, very low. And I'd like to know if you guys had similar experiences, but
Interesting.
I expected we'd be talking to, the elite, and the people who would attend would be extremely knowledgeable about this kind of stuff and would keep abreast of all the latest happenings. And that just wasn't the case. I mean, we met some people that were extremely knowledgeable, for sure. We met some brilliant people, but I'd say, a solid 90% of the people we talked to were novices. I mean, they had open minds in many cases, but to say they had heard of Dcrtime would be obscene. I mean, most of them had just heard of Bitcoin, and maybe the odd person had heard of the other one, Ethereum, and they could hardly even name it in most cases, but they had heard of another one that was big now. But yeah, we're really at the beginnings of the beginning. We're not, in the middle game here. And that's why I think, when we look at the market and its maturity, it's really early on to talk about, to get excited about $100 billion market cap. I mean, I see this being a lot bigger than that, multi-trillions once people start getting involved. And yeah, for sure, it's going to become a bubble, and maybe we've already gotten ahead of ourselves. But I don't see the type of broad participation and knowledge about crypto that I really expected. I mean, I'd like to know Marco's thoughts on this, because he talked to a lot of people who were probably a little more technically savvy in some of those parties that you guys attended, and well, I was at some of them as well. But what was your thinking on that, Marco? Did you have contact with a lot of people who were very, very proficient in this stuff, or was it mostly novices and people who were maybe predisposed to learning about it but hadn't really jumped in yet?
I saw a varied mix of folks. So first off, I actually really truly enjoyed the conference. It was fun. I got to meet a lot of very interesting people. I got to say, probably the most tech savvy portion, which was really odd, was actually the TravelCon party. The folks over there. One of the guys over there was a PhD in crypto. There are not too many of those, so he was very interesting to talk to. But overall, in that particular party, there were a lot of very interesting folks with a lot of in-depth knowledge of the crypto space and even cryptocurrency space. Outside of that, I met a lot of folks that had pretty much no idea. Yeah, heard of Bitcoin, but really don't know what it means, right? Magic internet money, right? That was pretty much the entirety of their of their knowledge base. But we also were walking through the conference where a guy stopped us because we were wearing Dcrtime shirts, and they were like, "Hey, man, Dcrtime, can you talk about that?" So a pretty mixed bag. I also am going to have to agree that there were a lot of posers, so a lot of folks that were, you call them spectators. I guess that's a fair way of also describing it. So there was a larger amount there than I expected of that. So there's a lot of people being recruited there as well. So I guess some folks were there to being recruited, and people that are trying to get into the space, to break into the space, and attending these conferences may work for them. I enjoyed most of the conversations, even with folks that were not very knowledgeable about crypto. They wanted to hear the message, right? They were interested in where this is heading. So all in all, I think it was a very positive experience for everybody. So I enjoyed it. I think we were able to convey some messages. I think we were able to convey what Dcrtime stands for and why it's great, and some of the challenges of the Bitcoin and even in the cryptocurrency space. So that said, I think overall it was a pretty good use of a couple of days of time.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. Like, I think the conference was done really well. But one of the main takeaways that I had, just as Jay-Z, was I was really surprised by the lack of cryptocurrency knowledge, and not crypto knowledge, but primarily the lack of involvement in the cryptocurrency space, because I was under the impression there was just going to be a lot more of it widespread, and that's not really the case. And so we've been in talks with Ricardo from Monero, and we're trying to actually either have bring a cryptocurrency village or bring some form of more of a cryptocurrency presence to the conference. But one of the big problems is they're like, well, what are you guys going to hack on? So I mean, I think there's lots of things that we can hack on in that regard, but I think they want to maybe be able to break the fundamental principles of blockchain technology, and that's not really necessary. And I think these topics are covered in some of the other villages that happen at the conference. But yeah, I was actually really shocked to see the lack of, I guess, more participation in the space. And I think we're going to see more of it. But as Jay-Z said, it definitely seems like we are early on. But overall, I thought it was a really well done conference. We got to hang out with some really cool people. We got to meet up with the Monero crowd. We got to hang out with them a couple nights. And yeah, I mean, I thought it was done really well. And I was more of a spectator too, so I guess I was kind of we're both posers showing up to the conference. But the people that I did meet, that I had in-depth technical conversations with, were definitely pretty well versed in their space. So it's really cool.
What I actually truly enjoyed about it is that I did get to use some of my skills. I was able to speak in different languages with several folks. So that was interesting. So there was a very international crowd, and I always enjoyed that. And I was able to geek out about all kinds of things, right? I mean, I talked CPU, I talked Amiga, I talked low-level electronics, I talked crypto. So so that was a very diverse crowd, and that made it all the fun for me.
Yeah, definitely. So does anybody, Austin, do you want to talk about DEFCON at all?
I just wish I've never gone yet. I've been wanting to go forever. I had a vacation planned already when you asked, and I was already booked. But yeah, I've always wanted to go. I'm a lock picker. I love hacking locks. I love old Wi-Fi hackers since late night.
We did some lock picking.
Yeah, good. Yeah. That's awesome. See, I want to lock pick with other people, not just by myself. It would have been fun. It would have been fun.
Have you picked your door lock at your house yet, Jay-Z?
Oh yeah.
I have. It's a piece of crap. I realized. Need to get some alloys on there.
Yeah. So last time I did that, I actually replaced all my locks. It was just a little too easy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. All right. Well, I guess let's get to the beat of the show now. So yeah, DEF CON was awesome. Really happy that we got to go. We handed out a lot of shirts. We got to talk to a lot of people. Hopefully provide some more knowledge with Dcred. And there's been some new people that have joined since that we met from the conference. That have joined the Slack channel specifically and seem to be participating in the community.
I'm really happy about that.
Yeah.
That was really good to see.
So most people that don't know that, I don't know if most people do know this that are watching, but so Marco is actually one of the main contributors of the hard fork voting system that we built. So I was wondering if Marco, if you could explain maybe briefly for the crowd, what the hard fork soft fork voting system is, and how does it work?
Okay, so let's start with the soft forking portion. Actually, from code-wise, that was by far the most complicated piece. Actually, believe it or not.
The soft fork.
Yeah, just code-wise, that those were some of the most complicated 400 lines of code that I ever read in my life. So we have like, I don't know, 10,000 lines of code to test it, but the entire portion of that code is actually about 400 or 500 lines, I want to say. So don't quote me on those numbers. I probably got it wrong, but it's really not a whole bunch of code, and it is a whole bunch of test code, and it took quite a bit of effort to actually get it figured out. So in what the soft forking portion really does is actually tighten the rules. That's the only thing the soft fork is allowed to do. So so you're not modifying consensus, you're just enforcing consensus harder, if you will. And we use that portion actually to also signal the network that a supermajority of clients had upgraded to a version that understands the next number of rules. And this is where the hard forking portion comes in. So first you need a signaling mechanism, which was in the soft forking portion, and that then signals the network. And then once the network is signaled, now you can actually start doing the hard fork voting.
Interesting.
Does that make sense, or did I gloss over it a little too quickly?
So I guess let's bring it back a little bit, and like for all the people that are just new out there, like the 1 minute pitch on, I guess, because maybe some people don't realize this, but like the voting portion of Dcred is like the foundation in my mind of like building the future of Dcred on top of it. And maybe you could briefly just talk about like from the staking part, and then how that works with the voting system, and then what that allows the network to do.
Okay, yeah, so I actually probably need to work on my elevator pitch here, because I still have not figured out the 20-second way or even the 1 minute way to describe any of this. But, let me try one more time. So in Dcred, every block has a number of votes, and those votes are capable of voting down the prior block, or you're going to be able to vote on an agenda that is set. So those votes are the ones that are going to ultimately enforce the rules on the network, or I need to rephrase that. They're going to enforce new rules potentially on the network. Mm-hmm. So as people are voting with their tickets that you can purchase, and again, this is where it gets a little complicated because we use these words a little bit interchangeably.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So, but that said, so every block, has the votes that, or the tickets that you can allow. Sorry, I'm losing my mind here.
And the tickets are essentially just a representation of locked up funds.
That's correct. Sorry, I forgot that part. Right. So you have to put what we call skin in the game. So you have to purchase a ticket, and with that ticket gives you the ability to vote. So, and again, voting is on agendas that are going to change the future of the network and where it's heading. So, and there's what we call voting windows, where you're actually allowed to vote on certain areas, and then as you progress through the voting, you are going to determine if you're going to be able to fork or not fork. And then what that means is, let's say we actually had the SDIF algorithm vote go through not too long ago. So SDIF is the stake difficulty algorithm. So that was a bit of what actually should have been a very contentious vote from a miner's perspective, right? So they were enjoying the higher fees that they could extract from people purchasing tickets. But we, and by we I mean Dave, with some folks in the community, actually wrote a pretty elaborate, beautiful algorithm that actually removed the craziness that was going on, because the price was swinging a little too wildly. So he came up with a better algorithm, and then we basically added that as an agenda to the voting portion of the blockchain, and people voted it in because the stakeholders, so people that actually have or own Dcred, were interested in passing the new STIF algorithm because they are more interested in flatter fees and more predictable fees, whereas the miners were not as interested. So in Bitcoin, this would have been a much larger fight. But over here, the people that actually have coin were the ones who were able to pull the trigger and make the decision.
Yeah, and one of the more surprising things about the vote is, I mean, how much adoption the vote got. I mean, I want to say it was only like 3% of the votes were no. Like,
yeah, I think it was like 98% or something.
Right.
Yes, which it goes to show. I mean, do proof of work miners actually hold and stake? I'm thinking no, right?
I think
If they do, they're not voting their self-interest.
So, get reward, convert to Bitcoin or to cash.
I think so.
That's my guess.
Yeah.
Or else they would have voted a lot harder.
Mm-hmm. Or if they are voting, they are very smart. like yeah. they see the benefit and the long-term effects of how this will be good for the network.
Well, I'm going to have to disagree there. So I don't think that miners ever have they really don't care about the long-term effects. So they purchased a bunch of equipment and they need to get that money out of there as quickly as possible. So this equipment is going to be worthless in a year. So they only have a very limited amount of time to get their monies out of that equipment. So I think that miners, by definition, are not interested in quality of service or anything like that. They just want their block reward and move on.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, right? Economic sense.
Yeah, sorry.
So no, that was my point, though. So it makes economic sense for them to extract their money as quickly as possible, and the servers be damned, really, for them. And again, I'm not disagreeing with that. If I was a miner, I would probably think that as well.
Yeah, I do tend to agree with that. The only difference I would say is with GPU mining, the world's been a little bit different for the past 2 years. It's not quite ASICs. GPUs are 3 or 4 or 5 years old are still making money right now, which is surprising just because of the amount of diversity of algorithms that exist and people that derive value from these multiple blockchains that you can mine.
Or we should just blame AMD and NVIDIA for not, making better GPUs. Dang it.
Yeah. So yeah, I will tend to agree, but yeah, I was really surprised that the contention in the vote was pretty low. But maybe that means majority of the people mining our currency are the dual mining crowd, and they're holding all their ETH and just dumping the DCR in the market. I don't know.
Well, actually, if you look at our valuation, I think that you'll see that as well, right? So because we tend to be pretty flat. So again, I think that most of the miners are basically offloading it as quickly as they mine it.
Yeah,
that's fine. It's theirs to do with as they please. But the nice thing about Dcred is they really have no power other than to create those blocks and then blow out the reward if they choose to do so. I mean, it hasn't been the best trade for them over the past year because I'm sure they would have done much better holding. But it doesn't matter. I mean, for every seller, there's a buyer on the other side, and I'm sure those buyers are very happy to take it off their hands.
Sure. Well, and what I actually think is healthy for Dcred is that our valuation has been taking a pretty steady line upwards versus the bubbly, upwards explosions that I've seen in some other currencies. In fact, I don't understand why some of them are valued as high as they are at this point.
Relative to our peers, we are severely undervalued. We're not even in the top 40 anymore. There was a time when we were in the top 10. Now it's just ICOs and all sorts of lesser coins that are, the flavor of the month. But
they have a really shiny website.
These things tend to self-correct, though, so I'm not really too worried about that.
We're doing the right thing. We're not a shiny website. We have working code, right? So in the end,
but we do have a shiny website too.
Well, we do have. In all fairness, yes, we have a very shiny website, but that's not. Those were not our roots, if you will, right? So we wrote code, put it out there first, and then we built a shiny website. Versus building a shiny website, see if you can attract some talent, and maybe you can or maybe you can't, and we start selling a bunch of vapors air.
And yeah, that's actually why I'm wearing this shirt today. You can find it on Crypto Graffiti store. Buy the fucking dip, guys, because we're there. So All right. Well, so we have this voting system, and what it allows you to do is set vote bits that allow the stakeholders, the people holding the currency, to lock up their funds for up to 142 days, which in cryptocurrency land is a long time. Like, it is a significantly long time in crypto land. I mean, that's like 10 years. And I mean, like, things move so fast. So, which is really cool. And then being able to vote and control the future of the protocol, and you get rewarded for it. And I guess essentially this is what the hard fork, soft fork voting system does. And when those funds actually get locked in, maybe you can talk about, I guess, the process of the voting process. So from what I'm aware of, that there's kind of the upgrade period where the network has to upgrade with the new release. The release has been hard coded, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that for a second.
Sure. So we kind of stopped prior where the soft fork ends, right? So where we're signaling that there's enough nodes on a network that understands the new rules. So once that's the case, then we go into
and the new rules are dormant on the release, right?
Oh yeah, let's talk about that for a second. So Dcrtime hard fork voting is not meant as a signaling mechanism. So we did cheat a little bit, and we did LN as a signaling thing, and we did that for two reasons really. Is we wanted to demonstrate we could have two votes at the same time. So at the same time as SDIF was going on, we also wanted to show off a little bit, in all honesty. But the other thing to consider though in LN, which makes LN a little bit special, is that LN is a gigantic pile of code. So that is a non-trivial amount of code tests. It's months worth of work. So if we are going to make or integrate LN into our code base, it is going to cost money, a lot of money, to lock devs up for months at a time. So we wanted on that particular one to be dead sure that the community did want LN before we actually went forward.
And LN means Lightning Network.
Yeah, Lightning Network. Yeah. So, but this was a one-off, and we really do not want to do this ever again. So I'm working on a new system that would do the signaling bits. So if you want to signal to the Dcrtime crowd that you want a feature, there's going to be a new mechanism for that. We'll talk more about that later. But from a hard forking perspective, what happens is we actually write all the code, and the code lies dormant inside the daemon. So once the voting starts and pass, fail, the code is going to be either activated or deactivated. No. And since it's activated on interval, everybody knows, at the end of that interval if it's going to happen, including the software. So, and if the vote passes, what happens then is that the code path for whatever consensus bits of code were there are now going to be routed through a different path. So, so for example, if you do the block size, I think it's everybody's favorite example. So we actually did that on testnet. So we made the testnet block 1.25 megs instead of 1 meg. And we did the same thing, right? So we basically wrote the code. It was laying dormant. People on testnet were voting. They voted yes, and it flipped over to 1.25 megs for the blocks. And we actually, generated some of them just, again, to show off that, hey, Bitcoin, check what we can do.
That's awesome. Yeah, it was, and for most people that don't know, like, updating the block size is a lot of work.
Oh, it was we should have picked something completely different. That was entirely way too much work for a show-off exercise. So the SDIF algorithm was a single function call. So if version this, go to the old one. If version greater than that, go to that call. So that was a much simpler from an execution of the hard fork perspective, much easier to do. The block size is all over the code. So that was hundreds of lines of code that had to change for that feature to be enabled. But we had picked it and we had said we're going to do it, so we did it. And now we have the code actually available if we want to do it in the future.
So, and I guess like this brings us to one of our questions from the community Reddit is, some people are worried about Blake 256 minor centralization when ASICs start being built for this algorithm. How malleable does the voting system allow us to be? I mean, can we change the proof of work algorithm? Can we change virtually anything in terms of the consensus rules?
So the answer is yes, but with some nuance. So we can definitely change the digesting algorithm. In fact, we have a single package where the digesting is happening. So we could actually very easily or conceivably change out the digesting algorithm to, like, say, SHA-256, right? In fact, if it's 32 bytes, that would be a 10-line code change. But there's a lot of detail there, right? So because it does mean that everything is using Blake 256 would have to be replaced. And again, I am 99% sure that we are only using the correct function calls, where there's going to be an outlier somewhere, right, where somebody hand-coded the SHA-256. So the code would have to be audited. So, but yes, that is definitely a thing that we can change. So things that are much harder to change and are not going to change, therefore, are the header. So we are not going to make any changes in the header. That will be way too complicated. Now you would have to start using heuristics to determine at what version you are, and there's version numbers early on in the header that we can mess with, but that turns into a disaster pretty quickly. So that is one of the areas that if we can, we will not make any changes to. But everything below the header is fair game and very doable to update.
Marco, can you envision a scenario where you'd actually want to change the algorithm? Because I mean, people talk about centralization, and I don't think centralization is that big of a deal under our system with the hybridized proof of work, proof of stake. But what would be one reason you'd want to change that algorithm?
Well, let's say Blake 256 is broken, right? So somebody figures out where the collisions are at. At that point, it's game over, right? So you need to replace it. The end, right? There's no ifs and buts there. So at that point, we'd have to do something else. So again, if it's a 32-byte digesting algorithm, it would be a relatively straightforward change. But if it's a SHA-512, hey, there's a whole lot more bytes now that needs to be accommodated, right? So that is going to play into block sizes. So that would be a pretty significant amount of work. But keep in mind, we actually do have the capability, right? We can do it. Now, it would be painful, but yes, it can be done. And again, so Blake 256 is going to get hacked at some point, right? SHA-256 is going to get hacked at some point. And there's, in fact, even some rumors going around the internet that it may have some collisions that have been found. Not substantiated, but the rumors are going around. So and if SHA-256 is broken, that'll be hilarious in Bitcoin land. So they don't have a mechanism to change any of this, right? So now what?
And how it's broken. Yeah, it's interesting.
I don't know about hilarious, but
well, I mean, dark comedy type of hilarious.
With billions of dollars on the line.
Yeah, and people's lives, and it's not a joke. I was being facetious, but it is a real deal, right? And cryptocurrencies need to be aware that this is going to happen somewhere down the line. So if you don't care, right? If you just one of those pump and dumps, then it's just fine, right? But if you want to be around 10 years from now, you need to have mechanisms to to prevent bad things from turning into extinction level events.
Definitely. Yeah. So I mean, like, let's say proof of work update happens, like proposal comes through, gets approved, people, and we'll talk about the proposal system next. But let's say the community wants to do a proof of work upgrade. Like what actual complications do you foresee happening in that sort of scenario?
Well, let's talk about the soft power here first. If the community comes up with a with a proposal that would be very hard to implement, or that people don't have interest in implementing, it may not get implemented, right? So it may be signaled, but it may not happen due to disinterest or too complicated or what have you, or whatever reason, right? So it's so I think that people need to understand and realize that the proposal system is going to be very powerful, but it's not going to be a we now control the the Company0 development organization. So let's say a hard no on that. You're not. We are going to work and try to work on things that are interesting and that we think are going to move the coin forward. But if there's 100 proposals, right, there's only a couple of us. We are not going to be able to do all the work, right? So part of the proposal system is going to be bring your own developers, right? So and a proposal needs to have enough technical depth so that it, if you actually show it, people with domain knowledge can go through it and say, okay, this is feasible, this can be done. Now we're going to be able to, release funds so you can hire devs and that kind of stuff. Does it make sense? I just want to make that clear.
And we'll we're going to touch on this stuff coming up when we dive more into the proposal system. But one person from Reddit, I thought had a good question, and I think this is a feeling amongst some of the other projects out there that other people might be concerned of, that in our community, like if a proof of work upgrade needs to happen, what do you envision it would kind of look like from, I guess, from a technical point of view, but not just changing the code, but like the actual ceremony of upgrading the network?
Well, it would be, quote unquote, just another hard fork vote, right? So the code would have to be written, very extensively tested, right? Because if you changing the proof of work algorithm is, changing everything, right? So now you're changing the mining code, you're changing all the consensus rules, and so it's that would be replacing most of the consensus bits, pretty much, right? That's just inherent to that. So it would be a very complicated endeavor. So I'm actually unsure what the question is. So here's what I can tell you about it. Yes, we can, right? Yes, we can.
So you'd probably have first, there'd be just a signal to see if everyone wanted to do it, right? And then once
sure
wanted to do it, then you someone would write an implementation code, and that would go for a more formal proposal, I suspect.
That's right.
And that would be voted on. So I like that. I like that. We already know exactly what we're voting on, like to the bit. It's not some sort of hand wavy. Like whimsical spec, right? We have actual implemented code ready to go, which is good. So then you'd have a vote on that. Would you do that? You were talking about a soft fork versus hard fork. So then you do like a soft fork vote to demonstrate that you have supermajority, so that the hard.
No, so that's not a vote. Soft forking is a signaling mechanism for all intents and purposes.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
cool.
what you're doing there is it signals how many people are on a certain version of the code, essentially. Right. So, and therefore, that if you have enough nodes on the network to participate in a vote, right? Because you need to have enough nodes that understand the vote bits.
Right. So does the soft fork, is that the voting mechanism? Does that come before or after the formal vote?
That comes before the formal vote. That is the thing. That is the mechanism that is going to enable the vote.
Right. I understand. That makes sense.
So and it's called soft forking because you're tightening the rules, right? Yeah. So you're saying, okay, you must understand this before we are going to move forward.
Right. It gives you a good way to sort of measure that's cool. That's good.
So, and a lot of people's complaint might be like, well, okay, like what if everybody doesn't want to like upgrade their nodes, right?
Well, then the vote's not going to proceed.
Well, I mean, yeah, then you never get to vote, but like then we're in a deadlock. But
that's a real issue, though, right? So if not enough people upgrade their nodes, then there's not going to be the vote, right? It's just not going to happen because you need to have the supermajority of people participating in the network. But I really do think that, and if I just notice what's going on on the wire, there's a pretty significant amount of people that are upgrading pretty much every release. So not a worry yet. And if we just have enough folks that are really involved in the project, I don't expect people not to upgrade, especially if we add some other juicy features to it, right?
But if it ever did become an issue, the stakeholders could start downvoting blocks that were generated with the old version.
Sure. Yeah, that's absolutely possible at any given time. Right. You can always vote down the prior block. So, and if there's a bad agent or bad agents, conceivably you can create a rule that to say if this block comes from this node, I am going to reject it. And then if enough people do that, then you could actually filter them out, if you will.
I see.
And obviously, if you do that a couple of times, then they don't get a block reward. Guess what? There's some upgrading happening.
Yes, exactly. So, I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that even though this upgrading process, the signaling process has to happen, it's still not going to create a deadlock amongst the community.
Right. Yeah. Well, and again, I lost my train of thought, actually. I heard a weird sound and I lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. It'll come back to me here in a second.
Yeah. Right. So that the ability for stakeholders to vote down other blocks is important, right? Otherwise, I could spin up 100,000 AWS instances running, intentionally running old instances of like old nodes. But that wouldn't be effective because stakeholders would just vote my old nodes down. Essentially soft fork away from me.
Right. So
Yeah.
you would basically not, they wouldn't like you, right? So
right. Exactly.
It's a bit more complicated than that, but that's essentially it. So, and actually the thing I was going to say is that the agreeing on the prior block is a permanent agenda. So that's in fact bit 0 in the vote bits, and that one is always on, and that's hard coded in the code. So, and if enough people say no, do that, then the vote is going to get so the block is going to get rejected, and the TX will go back in the mempool. So if you're a miner, you don't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
but did I answer actually the proof of work question? Because I'm confused as what the question actually was.
So well, okay. So you would have everybody mining the old network, and then maybe you even need new hardware to mine the new network. Like, how does this crossover period happen?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So it's going to be unfun. That's the reality of it. So
there are mechanisms you can use,
and I'm sure we would actually, is to have a very low difficulty if that would actually be the case, right? So that you don't jam the network for the next couple of weeks, right? So you have, I don't know, making it up. You have a terahash of processing power right now, and then you flip, right? That you're not going to flip 1 terahash worth of
difficulty,
right? So at that point, you need to have a single 0 in front of in front of the blocks to mine it, and then you need to ramp up the difficulty again. So there's a whole bunch of complexities involved. This is this will be the hardest hard fork vote you could actually do.
Yeah.
But technically, we have all the bits and bobs currently in the code to achieve that. So that is the thing to take away from this, is that we can virtually change everything in the protocol. Now, not everything is going to be fun, good, or easy, but technically we can.
Yeah.
And did you have anything you wanted to follow up with, Austin?
I was just going to say that, like, there exist mechanisms by which you can gradually shift from one proof of work algorithm to another, so it doesn't have to be a light switch. You could make a light switch and start with low difficulty, that would work. But there are ways you could say you can shift from 90%, for example, proof of work, the old proof of work, and 10% new proof of work, and then dial up. There are a handful of ways to do that, but it's still going to be nasty.
So that would never work well in code. So as a guy who's involved in the tech, that would get a hard no from me with foot stomping and all the stuff that goes with
it. Increased complexity, for sure.
Yeah. So I would be on board with tightening the rules and tightening the code, over multiple voting periods to get to a new proof of work mechanism, if it would be possible. But having 1090 or 8020, that'll never work. I'll just as a experienced hacker, I can promise you that's going to be a complete disaster. So no to that. Hard no.
All right. Well, anyways, we'll move on from these hypothetical situations. But okay, so now we want to jump into the proposal system that is up and coming. It's I guess the next big release type stuff that we expect to see coming from the Dcrtime developers, and it's a really cool system. And what this essential system is going to do is allow people to voice their opinions on getting things funded. So we have a whole bunch of money, I think over $10 million. I don't know, Jay-Z probably knows the exact dollar amount.
It's a lot.
So
yeah, obviously changes relative to the dollar as price fluctuates, but we have roughly $10-ish million in Dcrtime sitting in a fund that is part of the 10% of the block reward. Every block, 10% of the reward gets pushed into a fund. And what that allows us to do is now take these funds and vote as a community what we want to propose or what we want to get funded. If we want to do some marketing stuff, or if we want to do some change to the proof of work algorithm, like there's going to need to be development that goes behind that and getting that pushed through. And so there's all sorts of things that you can start to fund on top of this sort of decentralized autonomous organization, which we probably shouldn't call it the DAO. Let's just call it development subsidy. I don't even like calling it a dev subsidy because like everybody thinks just the developers have access to it.
Decentralized autonomous organization, which.
Oh, Austin, sorry. So now I want to talk about that with you, Marco. So Marco built, I think, all of the system, majority of the system. I'm sure the other developers have helped with some of the code, but I know he's responsible for a big portion of it, if not all of it. So in a broad overview, like, how does this proposal system work?
Okay, so so the proposal system is what we want to be a full-on signaling mechanism, and what I mean by that is we want to know direction from the community, right? So before we go write, 100,000 lines of code, we kind of want to have an idea if people are actually excited about something or not, right? So the idea is that any person is going to be able to submit a proposal, and submitting a proposal is going to be a website that you go to. You type up your a piece of text. You link some pictures into it so you can diagram it, and that then becomes your proposal. You submit that, and it goes through a filter, if you will, because it is the internet, right? So there's going to be some trolling. There's going to be some Apple trying to do what they think are funny things. So we are going to actually apply some form of censorship to proposals. So like blatant racist stuff. I mean, I don't want my name associated with that.
Absolutely.
So that's
what is the initial barrier to entry before you submit a proposal? Are you going to need to prove you have a ticket? Are you going to need to prove you have a certain amount of Dcred, maybe pay a nominal fee? Is there going to be any type of filter like that before you get to the secondary screening?
So we need to be, this is where I'm going to, I should have led with that. The proposal system is actively under development, and a lot of these details have not been completely worked out yet. So this is subject to change. In fact, it's going to change. So if you hear me say it and then you're going to repeat it and I say it didn't happen, it didn't happen. So with that disclaimer, there are some ideas floating around right now between the developers on how to do that. So there's folks that are saying, okay, it needs to be a largest amount of Dcred that you put on the line. You don't lose it, but you have to put it on the line, just like with a ticket. So let's pick a number, right? You have to put 1,000 Dcred on the line, which basically means if you're going to submit, a proposal that is all crap, then that would obviously keep those people out, right? Or most likely keep those people out. So, but that would also make the entrance much higher, and therefore people would have to shop their idea, and and there's folks that agree or disagree with that idea. So. So there's some other folks that want a much lower fee, like 1 Dcred, 10 Dcred, something in that area to submit a proposal, or no fees at all. It's a free for all, and then we let the censorship portion deal with just the terrible stuff that is going to come through. So that this is subject to change. There is no hard determination there yet. So I know what we have now, and right now it is not dealing with fees yet, because that is going to become part of the website, which is not currently under development yet, because we are finalizing the back-end portions first.
So, and then to bring this back, what we're talking about is taking, some sort of proposal. Let's say I want to shave a cat. That's kind of the Dcred joke.
Yep, that is the Dcred proposal that everybody wants.
So I want to shave a cat, and I write up a proposal, and I say, hey guys, I need 10 Dcred to shave this cat. I want to give him a really good shaving or whatever. And really good barber, the best cat shaving barber out there. So I go to the website, I type up my little proposal, I say this is how much money I need, and then I submit that proposal to the system. And then let's say that people in the community are like, yeah, let's shave that cat. And then I think there would be more of a formalized vote. Like, can we get back to like that process after the whole filtering kind of tangent we went off on?
Well, so let's get out of the way that the shaved cat would not make the censorship portion. So let's talk about a censorship for 5 seconds, though. So once you submit a proposal, you are going to get a token, and that token serves 2 purposes. One of them, it's a censorship token that you can use to prove that so whomever is going to man the proposal system censored your proposal. And you can then, if you disagree with it, you can take that and pull the proposal back out of the system and show people and go shop your grievance, right? So it is not a black hole. So it is, you are going to be able to complain if you think you've been treated unfairly. We are not big fans of censorship. You've met the other guys, right? And everybody's pretty much pro-speech. But again, I don't want to be associated with just crap that comes from the internet. So that said, so once you actually make it past the censorship portion, then you get into what we call a public repo, where everybody can see what has been proposed. And the idea that we have there is to make it kind of like the US government works, right? So a senator can come up with the dumbest thing ever, and they do all the time, and they suggest it, and it does become part of the public record, right? Forevermore, it will be part of the public record. And we are going to do something along those lines. So once a proposal makes it past censorship, it is going to become part of the public record forevermore. So there's no unwinding that. It can totally be disregarded at that point, but it is going to be there forever. Does it make sense? So yeah. So that's the rough idea, and then we're going to also implement a way to iterate over these proposals, right? So the first proposal, had some merit to it. We don't like it in its current form, but if you iterate it, we'll be able to, maybe move it into a voting stage, right? So that's the idea. So in the thing to realize here is that proposals are going to have agreement from domain specialists, right? So, and what that means is that if there is a marketing proposal and it costs money, so somebody who is familiar and works in that area in Dcrt has to go read the proposal and agree to it and say, okay, this is a fair amount of money for the budget, right?
And you're talking about like kind of the initial censorship.
No, I'm past that, right? So at this point, it's become part of the once it becomes part of the public record, right? Okay. Then the domain knowledge people are going to.
So how does it get through the censorship part? Like who goes through those and is like, okay, this looks good?
We are going to staff that with contractors probably that are going to do the initial vetting of proposals. But again, we are just looking to weed out, the terrible internet stuff that's going to happen.
Like racist stuff or just stupid crap that just doesn't make any sense.
So we may tighten the screws there a little bit. I mean, if you submit a proposal, say we need to do this marketing idea, right, and it's a one-liner, that's really not a great proposal, right? So we may shoot that one back as well, or let's say if it does become part of the vetted portion, right, so that it actually has been proposed, that one probably will never make it to a vote, right? Because you need to have a lot more meat on that bone.
Sure.
So marketing is going to require budgets, graphs, marketing-y stuff that I don't understand. So let's talk about the technical portions. So if you submit a technical proposal, you're going to have to submit a spec of sorts, right? So you cannot just say, I want feature X, Y, and Z. Great, so do I. Now what, right? So that would not work. So what we need there is we need people to provide, pseudocode spec level documentation so that somebody who has domain knowledge can go look at that and say, okay, we can actually go build this, right? That there is merit here, and if it is doable, now we can actually go put it up for a signaling vote. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So technical proposals are going to have to be in depth. Marketing proposals are going to have budgets, right? And just color it all in, right? So we are not going to deal with one-liners. That is just not going to happen.
What kind of turnaround time are we talking about, let's say, from someone making a proposal to, let's say, getting funds allocated for marketing or something not extremely important, but important enough that, time would play a significant role?
So the numbers we are toying with right now is that it'll take a week to activate a vote, because people need to know that the signaling is going to start and going to go on, right? And then the other number that we are toying with is that the vote is going to last for about a week. So we are talking about potentially a 2-week time, but those could be shortened in length. And again, these numbers are at this point arbitrary. So, but that's the idea that we're thinking about. So 1 to 2 weeks worth of turnarounds. But that is from a proposal that does have enough meat on the bone to actually be ready to become a signaling vote.
And for proposals that don't have enough meat, will you be able to give them feedback on like, hey, just add more information?
Yeah, so that is going to be part of the website portion, though. So, but yes, that is going to have to happen, right? So if you didn't do a marketing budget, then we need to have the ability to say, hey, like your proposal, but we need a budget, right? So what do you think this would cost? You know, how many man hours? What is the expected result, right? So what's the cost? You know, cost benefit analysis. There's P&L, right? There's all kinds of stuff that would have to happen, and we should be able to signal back to the person who made that proposal to get that information.
Gotcha.
So it should be interactive, although we obviously are going to want more complete proposals, right? Because that you know, a bunch of churn is just that, right? A bunch of churn.
Sure. So, all right. So most people, I don't know who does realize this, but so Company0 is a company that is really active in developing Dcred, and you guys are primary holders of these funds right now, and eventually the proposal system will work with smart contracts, and you know, you'll kind of relinquish those rights to those funds over to the community. How do you foresee the transference of this power of you know, Company0 owning Dcred into the community having much more
it's not
say?
Company0, it's DHG. I mean, Company0 doesn't hold those funds. There is some kind of legal distinction for now, but for all intents and purposes, we know, you know, the people running one show are very close to the people running the other. So yeah.
I think Jake is custodian of those funds, but you know, everybody's doing a great job, so there's no hating on that. But yes, so DHG relinquishing those funds over to I guess the community subsidy fund. I guess how do you envision that going?
Well, technically speaking, that actually would not be very complicated. So once we have the proposal system in place, we could have a smart contract that actually does that portion of the releasing the physical funds. So again, that technically is not very complicated. So what is very complicated, though, is how the human element of that works, right? So and that is hotly debated, I think is the right word to describe that, on how we are going to do that. So we do have all the intents and purposes that somewhere, you know, by year's end, that we actually have an answer for this question. So I am not going to go into details, but I will tell you the intent. So the intent is that Dcred will be a full-on DAO, and people are going to make proposals. Those proposals are then going to be the signaling votes are going to indicate if it's going to work out for the community. Once it gets worked out by the community, then the funds would be released. That is the process that we are trying to get to. But again, the human element is where this is complicated, right? So how do we do this? How do we do this safely? Do we need to do some sort of escrow, something or another, right? So that, you know, if somebody actually was scamming, you know, to just get some funds out of the, you know, out of the Dcred fund. There's a lot of detail there that needs to be worked through.
We don't want another Ethereum DAO situation, I'm sure.
Certainly do not.
So and then with the proposal system, I know you guys built this cool thing called Dcrtime. And what I believe Dcrtime is built off Peter Todd's ideas of open timestamps. And I was wondering if you could talk about you know, Dcrtime and how it works with the proposal system. And then I think Austin's going to follow up with some more questions specifically around Dcrtime.
Okay, yeah, so Dcrtime is definitely based on Peter Todd's excellent blog post and some of his code that he wrote to basically anchor digests into the blockchain. So what that gives you is it gives you proof of existence for a certain, for any record really, right? Because you can digest any file and then anchor that into the chain, and then at any given point with that digest, you can prove that that document existed at a certain point in time.
Cool.
So it sounds very simple.
You can't recreate the document, but you can prove that that document existed.
Well, I can recreate a document that only has the letter A in it.
Sure.
So, but if you have a more complicated, much more likely scenario where you edit a Word file and a lot of the metadata has changed, then recreating it would be much harder. But I think what you're trying to say though is that you as the holder of that document can prove that you had it, right, and then you can prove in the blockchain that it existed at a certain point in time.
Right.
Yeah.
So, so simple idea, but extremely powerful. And the way we are going to use this in the proposal system is we are actually using Git as the file system snapshotting mechanism. So as the proposals come through, they get committed to a Git repo. And then we actually take the digests of the commits, so the hashes of the commits, and those are the ones that then get anchored in the proposal system. So in other words, you can prove that every commit happened at a certain point in time, because it's just a digest at that point, right? So we can, quote unquote, theoretically infinitely compress a whole bunch of digests into a single Merkle root, right, that we then can use to verify the existence of every single commit ever made in that repo. So in other words, you can see that the repo was completely unaltered, because if it would be, then it would not add up. So we're going actually a little bit above and beyond here. Git actually pretty much provides this functionality already. You could not really cheat with time, but just putting it in the blockchain, that's just great. Just makes it extra awesome cool, right? And then everybody has verifiable proof, on their home machine that the repo was not messed with.
Yeah, it's immutable. So I think Austin has some questions around, potential use cases. So
I was going to actually you mentioned that this was it was an implementation of a Dcrtime specific implementation of Peter Todd's open timestamps, which actually that answers all my questions.
Okay, yeah. So it's a very powerful idea. I mean, so if you are, for example, an office that has a bunch of lawyers, right? They write Word documents all day long. At the end of the day, you collect all those, right? You digest them and you punch them into the blockchain. And now you have if you add a little database to that, you got an audit trail that is verifiable by every external party. So it's extremely powerful for provenance, and healthcare is another one that could really benefit from such a system. So and the cool thing though is that the proposal is actually going to use that as the bottom part, if you will, to to make the proposals verifiable by external parties, to make sure that we did not alter any of the bits along the way, or anyone alter the bits along the way.
Yeah, it's good for key revocation too. So if I have a good valid public key that and I sign some message and post them somewhere, and then at some other point I revoke my key, you may not know whether, let's say my key got hacked or whatever, my key got stolen, my private key became public. So I would revoke my key. You would see the message, you'd see the signature, but you might not know whether the message was signed before or after I had revoked my key.
Mm-hmm.
Timestamping everything, then whether or not to trust the signature or not. There's lots of really good use cases for this stuff.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm actually really excited about this is the provenance stuff, right? So the healthcare records and all that, where there's a lot of scrutiny on immutable records and all that, right? And just moving time forward versus being able to alter things.
Yeah,
so
like HIPAA
it really provides that capability pretty handily.
Yeah, definitely.
So, so what other use cases do you foresee with the proposal system? I mean, will it only ever be used to just fund DCR proposals, or do you? I mean, maybe this goes back to Dcrtime again, but do you see other use cases for this?
Sure, I can see a million use cases. We're not going to write them, but so if you take the unvetted portion out of the thing, right, and you just use it internally for your as a backup system, if you will, right, or a validation of your backup system. So let's say you back up your Git repos, right, somewhere, or your GitHub repos, even, so the ones that are public. If you anchor all that into the blockchain, you can roll back and make sure. So if somebody hacked your GitHub repo, right, and they do something funky, you could at any given time figure out if that had happened, right? So so I don't know how old you guys are, but there's an old Unix tool called Tripwire. And what Tripwire did is it basically generated digests of all the files on a file system, right? All operating system files. And if any of them changed for whatever reason, then they could detect that maybe a virus or something had altered that file, right? So, and you can build those systems, and and make them third-party verifiable. And that is where the power comes in. So you can use this for backup systems, for document management systems. There's CRM. There's endless possibility here. And this is actually, honestly, the most excited I have been about blockchain technology. This makes it real for me. So this is okay. Now it's no longer a oh, it's a really cool crypto toy. No, this is real right now. There's a real use case for real world scenarios.
There's no privacy concerns because it's a bunch of hashes, right? It makes no difference and reveals nothing about the underlying files.
Yeah, this is it. This is what I think will actually put blockchain over the geek hump, if you will.
Awesome. Well, all right, guys. We have so many other questions.
Yeah.
Well, I got a couple more minutes.
Okay.
Do a couple more. I will let you know when I run physically out of time.
Okay. Well, I want to talk about the proposal system more, but we need to kind of move on. It's going to be awesome. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how voting and like how staking and prices of staking can move once people are actually able to fund proposals with their tickets, because now you're adding more value on staking, which is really cool. I think there's so many possibilities in this future. I mean, you could do things like, hey, like we're going to support all network transactions through the proposal system, and we're going to use the proposal system to fund businesses, and these businesses are going to pay to support the network, so you can have, grow the network infinitely. I mean, these are just some of the ideas that you can start to foresee when you have a system like this built at the heart of the project. So really cool stuff. So what I want to talk about next, and I'm going to let Austin take this, is ZKC. So I know, Marco, you wrote most of, if not all of, if I looked at the GitHub, I think there's most of the lines of code of ZKC, which is Zero Knowledge Communications, which is an IRC-like chat that is very privacy oriented. I wonder if, I guess, I'll pass it off to Austin now, but just wanted to give the listeners out there an idea of what ZKC is. Yeah,
I was hoping to read more about this. I pretty much have only read the README from the GitHub repo. You mentioned that you've taken some pieces of a few different protocols that you liked, and I'm curious like what those pieces are and what improvements you saw. For example, above, I think Signal is a good leading example. What weaknesses you see there, or what use cases you wanted that weren't served well by Signal. Yeah, I guess just talk more about the motivation behind creating the protocol and what changes you've made when you mix and matched other things.
Sure. So we looked at a lot of these systems, and we wanted full privacy. That was number one, and we wanted bleeding edge crypto awesomeness. So those were the two principles, if you will. So Signal suffers from two major deficiencies. Great stuff in there, by the way. So the ratchet code and that is just phenomenal awesomeness. But I'm going to make no friends right now. But it was written in Java, and I don't want any part of that. Sure. So, moving on from that one. So what Signal suffers from, and I think this is a real deficiency. I get it from their business perspective. So I'm not knocking that. I get what they're doing. But doing a zero knowledge crypto or messaging client on a mobile device is silly, right? So there's no way that your iPhone is secure. Sorry, right? It's just not. So there's people that have access to the contents of it. So therefore, that was one big thing for us. Is like, you know what? We don't want this on mobile devices. This is not going to work for us. We're not going to be okay with that. So that made Signal, as great as it is, a bit useless to us. But we did borrow the ratchet because that was really awesome stuff.
Yeah.
So then there's Pond. Pond takes it to the other extreme, right? So now you use Store, and your messages are disintermediated by being delivered late and received and picked up on a varying schedule, so that which is really, really great, but that is way too complicated, and you need much quicker turnaround for people to be able to instant communicate. So that said, Bonds did use a bunch of ED25519, which has all kinds of really nice properties, so that you can sign, you can extend keys, you can derive everything from identities. It's just a absolutely fantastic curve. Encrypting and decrypting runs at the same speed. I can go on. I can geek out about this all day long, because that curve basically fit all the magical bits and bobs that we needed to quickly be able to encrypt and decrypt things. And so that combined with NACL or SALT, right, or NaCl, whatever you want to call it. So they use ED25519 to create box and secret box. Right? Everybody still with me? Everybody falling asleep? So
nope.
That said, what we did.
That's over my head, but I know that people are super
pretend.
interested in this conversation.
Yeah. So, but what we did is essentially we combined those three. So we took the ratchet from Signal. We took NACL that uses ED25519, and we used Box on that. And Box is a public-private key thing. So, and what we did is we used the ratchets to basically always ratchet the key for the next message. So every time you send a message, it is encrypted with a different key. So you cannot unwind communications, right? So
you also get backward secrecy too. So even if you have an active attacker who's currently in control of your machine, if you say update and patch the vulnerability and they no longer have access, assuming your messages have enough entropy, they can't follow along. So you can recover from an active attack, which is amazing. The ratchet's amazing.
Yeah, the ratchet is phenomenal. So, and that's what we were trying to do, though. So, and then what we did, we actually took that and we recreated actually the ERC type interface, the text interface. So most of us like to, we have our secure COM machine that we then SSH to, right, and tmux that up, right, so that it only runs in one spot. So, so that said, we wanted a non GUI, and I'm going to be careful here. The reason we don't want a GUI is because we want to be able to disconnect from that machine. So, as a bunch of old Unix farts, we went old school on the text portion of it. So there's nothing that prevents it from taking the protocol underneath and just slapping a pretty GUI on top, right? It doesn't fit our use case.
Yeah.
So the protocol is very slick. You can use it to send files. I can tell you what's actually happening behind the scenes. So we are working on some quantum resistance in the background. So that may happen at some point. There's some code that works. We haven't released it yet because we need to audit it. We're thinking about audio, so adding voice capability.
Cool.
So there's definitely some things going on there that are going to make this an even more exciting tool.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you have one of the things that comes up a lot, or has been coming up over the last maybe 24 hours in one of the Slack channels, is whether the do you have a formal protocol spec and auditability? Has it been audited by third parties yet, or any independent third parties? Which might actually be a good case. It might be a good case to be made there that'd be a good use of the DAO funds.
So we have to disconnect DAO from, or Dcrtime from ZKC. So we happen to be the same guys that wrote it, but they are not under the same umbrella and definitely not the same funding mechanism.
I see. Gotcha.
So no to that. The NACL code has been audited, right? And DJB put quite a bit of effort into going up and down that curve and making sure that it worked correctly.
Cool.
So that said, we are using AGL's version of that, and that has had some third-party attention, but not enough. So we are still cautious about the amount of auditing that it would require. So it seems to work. We are content, but we would welcome really a third-party audit, whichever way that would work.
Cool.
On the formal spec documentation, so we kind of slapped it together. It might sound a bit odd, but there was a lot of design that went into the actual underlying crypto primitives, but the protocol was a little bit more ad hoc. So that has been written. It is it is tested and all that kind of good stuff, but we never wrote the formal documentation for it.
Gotcha. Okay.
But there's nothing that, again, the code is out there, right? So it would not be that terribly hard to, to write the documentation for it, with the exception, obviously, of the ratchet, which would have to be identical to ours, right? To the current code for it to even work.
Yeah, that's cool. How long did it take you to write this?
So we had, I want to say, 1 or 2 false starts, where we are starting to go down I think that's about right. So I want to say about 6 months or so, of which 1 or 2 months were not wasted, but were not going in the right direction. So that code did not totally survive. Some of it was reusable, some of it wasn't. So at about 6 months, I think is about right. Is that what we spent on it? So none of these things, again, are simple, right? So even though the tool is very simple and it only does 30 things, well, that's, none of them are hard. Right?
Yeah.
Including writing a text GUI.
So the motivation, so one of the motivations you mentioned was that endpoints, mobile phones that are insecure. Totally agree with that. I would argue that so are most computers running modern operating systems.
Sorry, say that
So
again?
so one of the arguments for writing ZKC was the fact that, like, mobile phones, if you're using Signal, for example, you're talking about one of the weaknesses of Signal being that the endpoint is a mobile phone, and mobile phones are pretty much trivially exploitable. Totally agree. I also think, though, that even regular desktop computers and laptop computers are also sort of, for any well-funded adversary, trivially exploitable as well. I guess endpoint security, I think, is a not solved problem, regardless of whether it's mobile phones or.
That depends, right? So if you use Windows or OS X, then I agree, right? This black box cannot audit it. Linux to a lesser degree.
I hear you.
Right, so I use OpenBSD. I build my own hardware. So I take a lot of the portions out of the equation. I wrote a bunch of the OpenBSD code that actually, on operating system level deals with this, and I am much more comfortable with that environment. So, but you're right. I mean, if you run Windows, Microsoft has full access to your box.
Yeah, totally.
I
agree. Yeah, so hardened Linux.
It's just the way it is, right?
Yeah, I would trust hardened Linux for sure over, any other operating system.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I am running really low on time now. So
Okay.
I am going to have to excuse myself at this point.
All right. Well, last thing. This is so ZKC is all written in Go.
Cool.
Maybe you could take like 1 minute. And just
1 minute. That's really it, because I have people calling me at this point.
Okay. Why Go?
Because Go is beautifully simple. That's the best way I would put it. You can take a C guy or a C++ guy or a Java guy, and they'll understand Go and be able to write Go in about a day. A week down the line, they're pretty good. A month down the line, they're experts. Unlike Java, C++, all the other object-oriented crap, it takes decades to become an expert, and you really never are. So one way to look at a language and its usefulness is how many keywords it has. If it has more than 10, it's probably broken. So not everybody agrees with me on that. A lot of people like all the complexity that object orientation brings. I despise it. I've had so many projects fail that I worked on because of the complexity involved in mapping objects into real world scenarios that were just not real and that couldn't be done. So then refactoring, it's just a disaster. And in Go, took a very well-working language, C, and made it better. So they removed a lot of the words and removed a lot of the boilerplate stuff. So Go is very simple to learn, very simple to grasp and use, and therefore we moved on from C to Go. We were originally a C company. So just some metrics. So the lines of code, which is not a great metric, but it is a metric, is about 25% of what it used to be. So a 100-line C program, we can usually write in about 25 in Go. So if you're a guy who comes afterwards and has to maintain that code, reading 25 lines is just easier than reading 100 lines, right? And if you do this in object orientation, you're probably talking about 1,000 lines, right, in different files, and you need an IDE, and again, game over. So if you want to write complex software, you should do it in a language that takes some of the complexity away from the from the language itself. So engineers love to boil the ocean, right? So you give them a very large toolbox, they're going to use every single last bit of it. And some things are considered bad templates. I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
So, and J-Rick is going to yell at me for this, but I have a lot of experience in this arena, and I've just not seen this movie end well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And thank you, Jay-Z, for joining. Austin, thank you, guys.
Awesome.
Marco is now on Twitter, everybody. You can find him. I can't remember what your Twitter name is.
At Marco_Peereboom.
Marco_Peereboom. It's in the description of this video. Follow him on Twitter. Follow Jay-Z. I think he's Jay-Z_BZ. Follow Austin. He's One Way Williams. One Way Function on Twitter. You can follow me. I'm _Tyler TY13R. Thanks for everybody for joining in, and we'll see you hopefully next week in our next episode of the Dcrtime Assembly. Have a good week, everybody. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Take it easy.